A slight noise buzzed from the headphones. Her dad in the front seat was driving her to a game of soccer. 16 years of life had brought Lyra to this moment, but you'll soon see why this was the beginning. "What?" she murmured, pulling off the purple and black plastic from her ears. "We're almost there," her dad said, reaching behind him to get something. Lyra sighed, handing her dad his phone, in which had dropped behind him. When her red hair bounced as she looked up, her eyes widened with terror. Her father saw this, then her falling as broken glass shattered his gaze towards her. She let out a loud yelp as she hit the car door, delving the glass further into her arm. She blinked, seeing the broken windshield, and black pavement, and a dented semi-truck. A tear slipped down her bloodied cheek, becoming an orange color. The world swirled around her gaze at the vision, and her life had faded. When her eyes opened again, she was no longer in pain or with blood. She gazed at the dew that sprinkled the grass around her. A shadow came across her, and she turned around, sitting up as the white, gauzy dress she was in the dream, of course, had whispered among the grass. "Need a hand?" A deep male voice broke out. Who are you?" she whispered, but only because it was all she could handle. His black bangs shifted as he helped her up. "I'm Raven, Rudellant," he spoke, his gray eyes holding a rather happy gleam. What's that?" Lyra questioned. "A Dallant is a spirit who watches over different worlds and accompanies something in death, or may choose to bring them back to life if they had a prophecy to fulfill." He spoke. Lyra's wide-eyed gaze shifted as she put her hand to her head. He gave her a sympathetic smile, then gestured for her to follow. They walked through the long stretch of grass, then reached the border into forest to her left. Sorry guys. Forest. To her left, she saw a dark, swampy pine forest. To her right, she saw mountains and waterfalls. A truly beautiful sight. "Choose your path." The boy's voice suddenly sounded ancient. As she glanced at his eyes, they were blazing yellow. "This will lead to your very wish." He pointed behind him. "To your darkest desire." He pointed to the pine forest. "To your deepest need." He pointed to the mountains. "And to a path that you weave." He glanced at the forest, then looked down at her. "Choose yours," he echoed, then vanished. Her eyes widened, looking around. Her deepest need, the path that she'd weave, her very wish, or her darkest desire. She looked at the forest, beautiful and bright. Was this a trick? She stepped towards the mountains. What was her deepest need? Her darkest desire? To rule her own place. Her very wish? To live. A path that she'd weave. To live a normal life. But what is her deepest need? She fully stepped onto the stone, feeling darkness surround her. She felt a breeze ruffle the stone, she felt a breeze ruffle her red hair, and the scent of water. She sniffed the air, then blood scent found her nose. She opened her eyes, but only to darkness. She fell into the bloody mess as it filled her mouth and lungs, then woke up with a sharp pain fading. She opened her eyes as she heard real voices, but saw nothing. All she could see was darkness. She put out one hand and could sense exactly where everything was. Although she had no sense of color, she could smell the bleach that hung on everything. The loud hum of the machines were louder to her because she could see nothing. She moved her head, and of the darkness, Raven appeared. "You can see only where I am. You're blind for everything except Dallant's," he spoke, walking over to Lyra. "You'll be able to sense your surroundings, but not see them," he murmured. "Why am I blind?" she whispered, not wanting the nurses outside her door to hear. Your greatest need wasn't found. You were made blind, so when you found your greatest need, you'd know, he spoke. Now, get all better so you can get out. He smiled, vanishing. She lay back on the pillow she could all but see, then falling back asleep. She opened her eyes to the full side of the room, but no one was in it. She suddenly saw a little boy so clearly she thought she was awake. She heard voices and startled awake with the nurses over her. She moved her sightless eyes at them, acting as if she could see. "She's awake!" one nurse squealed. Then Lyra felt one less gaze on her as the nurse shifted some papers. "Where are my parents?" Lyra asked. She felt their sadness creep next to her. She vaguely remembered her mom dying of a disease, but what about her father? "Your father has passed," the second nurse murmured. Tears welled up in Lyra's sightless eyes, and she glanced down, despite seeing nothing. "Am I going to be okay?" she asked slowly. "Just a few days in the hospital, and you'll be out," the first nurse answered. "Where will I go?" They all paused. "Well, because you're 16, we're letting you decide. Would you like to live in a foster home, get adopted, or stay here a bit longer?" the first one asked. "Adopted, I guess," she said, and felt their happiness overwhelm her.